If you eat a pound of bacon versus one apple, you're going to have a better insulin level, a better glucose level. You're going to have every single amino acid and fatty acid that your body needs, but that's not what a lot of people have been taught. Honey is junk food.
Dr. Ken Berry is a board-certified physician who is tearing down the medical establishment's dietary lies. He returns to expose why your healthy breakfast is a death sentence, the link between insulin and cancer, and the controversial diet that reverses disease.
Doctors can check thousands of dollars worth of lab work and still not uncover severe metabolic disease if they don't check your insulin. All these cancers are tied directly to your insulin being above 10.
So what do people have to do to actually make a real change in their health?
You need to remove all added sugar. That's step number one. When you lower the carbohydrate intake consistently enough, your type 2 diabetes or your prediabetes goes completely away. The number one risk factor for developing prediabetes and type 2 diabetes is not high LDL. It's being obese, having metabolic syndrome, having high blood pressure. All of those things drop and improve drastically on my diet of bologna, hot dogs, eggs, ground beef, and bacon. You reverse the biggest risk factors for heart attack and stroke by eating this poor white boy diet.
Dr. Berry, I want to start this conversation with a story about you because you've been a doctor for decades, but you weren't always a healthy doctor. You were pre-diabetic, you were fat, as you say, and you were sick, but you were following all the guidelines. Then you flipped it. And even you say that the old food pyramid wasn't a guide. It was a disaster. But then last week, the US government introduced a new food pyramid, and it sounds like it's exactly what you've been advocating for: red meat and healthy fat. So my first question, how do you feel now that the food pyramid has changed? Do you think that you know that you were right all along?
Well, I know I was right all along. I've seen the evidence in too many thousands of patients and clients online. There's no doubt that we in the low-carb, keto, carnivore space are correct about what human beings should eat. The new food pyramid or the inverted pyramid, the dietary guidelines that were just released by the U.S. federal government should give us cause for hope. I think that it makes it very, very clear that our message is growing and becoming very strong, and that the powers that be have noticed it. And that is cause for hope. But I want everybody watching this to realize that all human beings, including you, are capable of false hope. And that's what I'm afraid is about to happen, is that people are going to just kind of lay down their shield and their sword and go back to just trusting the powers that be. And I would highly, highly caution you not to do that. And I want to get into specifically why I'm saying that. But let's just say even the new dietary guidelines put out in 2025, they're going to be in place allegedly until 2030. But keep in mind that the big food and big pharma corporations, and indeed the big medical kind of regulatory agencies like the American Medical Association, the American Diabetes Association, they have way more lobbyists in Washington, D.C. than you do. I don't have any. Do you have any, Rena? I can't afford one. No, we don't have any. And nor does anybody watching this. And so there's already problems in the new guidelines that if you just look at the food pyramid, the new one, it looks great. If you live in a Western society that reads from left to right, the very first thing in the top left corner is red meat. And then there's chicken, there's butter, there's ground beef. Yes, 100%. That image is brilliant. It is beautiful. It puts whole grains right where they need to be, which is at the very bottom, at the smallest part of the pyramid. That's brilliant. Perfect. It puts fruit. It puts vegetables noticeably higher on the pyramid than fruits, which is excellent. It minimizes fruit juices, which is excellent. So the visual part of this is great. Now, when you read the 9-page actual guidelines, which is also an improvement from previous guidelines, which were formerly about 100 pages long, Now they're 9 pages, which if you're talking about common sense real food, it makes sense. You don't need 100 or 200 pages to explain to a human how to eat. Just if we take cows, for example, their dietary guidelines can be not only 1 page, but just 1 sentence. Eat lots of grass. It's just that simple, right? It doesn't need to be 100 pages. I would opine that the food guidelines for humans could be 1 page long, if you were being completely honest. Now, the problem with the printed part of the guidelines, not the food pyramid, is that they still have a cap on the amount of saturated fat that you should eat a day. It's still capped at 10%. So there's literally no way to eat what's pictured in the guidelines, in the pyramid, and still meet that cap. So that is evidence. When anybody that reads that and goes, how do you even do that if you're eating butter and red meat and chicken with the skin on, which is what's pictured? You can't. It's impossible. And that's the evidence of the big food corporations still having a say-so with the food pyramid and the dietary guidelines. That's evidence of that. Now, in the written part of the guidelines, they did lower the recommendation that it's totally fine for children to have up to 10% of their calories a day from added sugar. That's what the old guidelines said. The new guidelines lower that to 2%, which is obviously a wonderful improvement. But they're still scared to death of saturated fat. And I know several people who worked on this, were in communication in the background, and they were completely shocked when the written part of the guidelines came out and still had the 10% saturated fat cap in the printed document. They're like, that's not what we discussed at all. Nobody said that we should have that, and yet there it is. And so what I want everybody watching this to really understand is this is an improvement. Yes, absolutely. The visual is going to help millions of people around the world to go, oh, okay, eat real whole low-carb foods. Okay, I can do that. But the written part of the guidelines is evidence that big food and big pharma still have their tentacles all over this, and that if something happens in Washington, D.C., in 3 years, and there's a new president, and it doesn't turn out to be someone who agrees with this current president, this can all be changed overnight. Even though it's supposed to be in effect until 2030, there's no guarantee of that whatsoever. That's caution number 1. Caution number 2 is the disparity between the actual visual pyramid and the 10% saturated fat cap that's still in the written guidelines. That's a huge red flag that not only is big food and big pharma not truly on board with Eat Real Food, they're actively trying to figure out how are we going to get around this? How are we going to follow the letter of the law, but really get what we want done? That's what lobbyists in Washington, D.C. do. That's their entire job, is to make language in regulation and law and guidelines that big corporations can get around. And so that's red flag number 2 and thing number 2. So I want people to have hope and be optimistic, but I never want that to be a foolish optimism or a false hope. And I'm afraid that that's what these guidelines are going to give us. And so I want everybody to go along with this and promote this, but don't for 1 second think that Pfizer and General Mills and the American Diabetes Association are like, yes, finally, real food guidelines, because they're not.
So what do people have to do to actually make a real change in their health? Is the food pyramid enough, or do they need to do something else?
Well, if people will look at the visual part of the inverted pyramid and eat mostly from the top left-hand portion, and then a little bit from the top right-hand portion, and then avoid everything in the bottom part of the pyramid, obviously avoid anything that's ultra-processed and contains grains, seed oils, and added sugar, their health is going to improve drastically. I tweeted yesterday that if every single person who sees the food guideline, if they would do just what I just said, that will reverse 60 to 70% of all the chronic diseases in America. Just that change alone. Now, if they try to read the guidelines, then they're going to be like, I can't eat according to this visual and still meet the written portion of the guidelines. And this is going to put registered dietitians and nutritionists who have to follow the guidelines. That's their mandate. It's going to put them in a bind because there's no way. And so this is evidence of big food and big pharma having their tentacles in this, because the average registered dietitian, when they have a client that comes to them, they're going to say, yeah, I know that red meat and butter and chicken with skin and ground beef is right up there on the top left, but you can't eat more than 10% of your calories a day from saturated fat. So the menu that I'm going to prescribe for you, I'm going to give you a daily food list to eat. It's not going to look like this pyramid because I have to follow the mandated 10% saturated fat cap. And so a lot of people are going to trust, okay, Trump has fixed this, MAGA has fixed this, Maha has fixed this. And then when they get their printed out, here's your weekly food plan from your registered dietitian, there's not going to be nearly as much red meat and minced beef, ground beef, animal fat as they need in their diet.
I'm glad that you said that, because I think people have to really challenge what dietary recommendations there are, even if their doctor says something, to say, well, actually, I can eat more saturated fat than 10% in the guidelines because I need that for my health. So moving on from the guidelines, because I think that is some news now that people are talking about, but it's really good to understand the root cause of why somebody has a problem. Think of fatty liver disease, type 2 diabetes, heart problems, weight issues, mental health. Dr. Berry, what is the number one underlying cause of every single chronic disease that somebody needs to know?
Hyperinsulinemia and chronic inappropriate inflammation. And these are 99% caused by the diet that someone is eating, and also 99% fixable by the diet that you switch to. If you don't make a false choice and switch to a diet that sounds healthier, but still keeps you in a hyperinsulinemic state and keeps you chronically, inappropriately inflamed. And so that's another reason I know that these new guidelines, nobody's really taking this seriously. If the American Diabetes Association was truly taking this seriously, their first tweet would have been, "We approve this message and go get your fasting insulin checked." And they still haven't mentioned fasting insulin, because that's the secret cheat code to see if you're eating a proper human diet or not, is to get your fasting insulin checked, your serum insulin. Different labs call it by different names. It's so important that it's kind of the keystone concept that I talk about in Common Sense Labs. But if you don't have, if doctors can check thousands of dollars worth of lab work and still not uncover severe metabolic disease if they don't check your insulin. It's just that simple. It's a very simple test. It's a very cheap test. It costs somewhere between $10 and $15 US. And so if you haven't had that lab checked, you do not have a complete picture of your metabolic health.
Absolutely. I was going to say that in the guidelines, they should probably put the fasting insulin. That would be the main point, as opposed to the food pyramid, because that would dictate whether somebody has chronic disease. Now, you mentioned hyperinsulinemia and inappropriate chronic inflammation. The hyperinsulinemia, what is the difference between hyperinsulinemia and insulin resistance?
So insulin resistance is a useful concept or construct to talk about, but it's really not usually a thing in real life. So insulin resistance implies that your insulin receptors are somehow resistant to the insulin molecule in your bloodstream. And we know very clearly that's not true for the vast majority of people. Now, there is a very, very small subset of people who do have a misconstructed insulin receptor that doesn't really take up insulin like it should. But that's super rare. Maybe 1 in 10 million people have that. The average person who's overweight and pre-diabetic and type 2 diabetic, they're not insulin resistant. They're just eating too many carbohydrates, which is causing chronic hyperglycemia, high blood sugar, which in turn causes chronic high insulin or hyperinsulinemia. That it's literally directly caused by your diet, but it also can be directly fixed by your diet. And that's why many of us in the low carb, keto, carnivore community have started calling type 2 diabetes glucose overdose or glucose toxicity syndrome, trying to paint it more as a poisoning or an overdose syndrome. That's exactly the right way to think about it, because if you call type 2 diabetes chronic carbohydrate overdose syndrome or chronic carbohydrate toxicity syndrome, the solution to the problem is actually in the name. Whereas type 2 diabetes sounds kind of nebulous, it sounds genetic, well, we don't know. But if you've got chronic carbohydrate overdose syndrome, then immediately any common sense person is going to go, so maybe I should lower my carbohydrate intake. Yes, that's correct. And that will reverse your type 2 diabetes completely when you lower the carbohydrate intake consistently enough, low enough, for long enough. Your type 2 diabetes or your prediabetes goes completely away.
So what I'm hearing you say, Dr. Berry, is that if somebody's watching and they have fatty liver disease, they have, as you said, the type 2 diabetes, they have a weight problem, they have some issue, because most people have a disease. If you just quit the carbohydrates and lower it, even though they're on medication, that's going to completely fix my disease. It's going to completely go away. I don't need a doctor. I don't need some fancy medication or anything.
Yeah. When you look at chronic carbohydrate overdose as an overdose syndrome or a poisoning syndrome or a toxicity syndrome, you don't need any of the medications to fix that. Indeed, the medications often work against that. Many of the medications for type 2 diabetes, they actually work by making your pancreas to produce more insulin. So they make you, even though they lower your blood sugar, which is part of the problem, but not the entire problem, they make you more hyperinsulinemic. This is not the solution, okay? This is a temporary bandage that makes the problem look less severe, but it doesn't reduce your risk of heart attack, stroke, or any of the other comorbidities of having prediabetes or type 2 diabetes at all. And so many conditions that people don't normally think of as metabolic diseases, like PCOS, like infertility, like acne, like psoriasis, like rosacea, like eczema, these things just start to get better. And it seems magical or miraculous, but it's not magic. It's just physiology. Because when you're chronically inflamed and chronically hyperinsulinemic, you're going to have skin conditions like eczema and psoriasis and skin tags and acanthosis nigricans. They're going to run rampant and go crazy. And they start to improve the minute you lower the carbs enough, for long enough, consistently enough. The same goes for gut issues, which in many cases are caused by the high insulin and high levels of inflammation. But in the case of gut conditions, the high inflammation is very often caused by the phytochemicals in all of the grains and all of the fruit juices and fruits and vegetables that people were told are super healthy. So people, when they cut the carbs, what they're also going to be doing is cutting the plant intake as well, aren't they? And so they're going to be lowering their dosage of phytochemicals. And so that's why we see so many people with ulcerative colitis, with Crohn's, with IBS-D or IBS-C. When they lower the carbs enough, they've also lowered the phytochemical load low enough that their gut just starts to heal and their symptoms drastically improve and their signs get better and their inflammatory labs start to improve. We see this also in joint conditions, like I mentioned, in skin conditions, but we also see this very, very importantly in mental health conditions. And there's more and more research going on with using a diet that puts you in ketosis. There's more research coming out every day showing, wow, this really improves anxiety, depression, OCD. This improves even schizophrenia and the more severe psychological and neurological conditions when your level of blood ketones is high enough. And I think that is part of it. Rena. But I think another big part of it is that your insulin has come down, your blood sugar has come down, your chronic inappropriate inflammation has come down, because if you're eating low carb enough to put yourself in ketosis, you've also drastically reduced the amount of phytochemicals that you're ingesting, have you not? See? And so it all kind of goes hand in hand. So many people have just had almost miraculous improvement with a carnivore diet. It's because they're usually in ketosis. It's because they've lowered their chronic insulin, their fasting insulin level drastically, and they've lowered their levels of chronic inappropriate inflammation drastically because they've lowered their intake of phytochemicals drastically. It all goes hand in hand once you pull back and look at the bigger picture.
Perfect. I just wanted to highlight around mental health because a lot of people, they might not know that they feel anxious, depressed, fatigue, brain fog, but it's so common. And I know that you and I have spoken to Dr. Georgia Eade, Dr. Chris Palmer, and there's so much evidence for a ketogenic diet with mental health issues. So I wanted to point that out. You mentioned this whole time about strategically lowering the carbohydrates, but what is the level of carbs that somebody needs to go to so that they have an understanding?
It varies, and that's part of the difficulty here, is for every concept, every lab result, every disease process in human beings, just like for every mammal, there's this thing called the normal distribution curve. And you might want to put a picture of that up so people kind of understand that. So for if you're talking about mental health, there's a level of carbohydrate and phytochemical intake that for some people, if they get it below that level, everything's going to get better. Some people have to lower it even more. Some people have to almost eliminate it in order to get the chronic health improvement that they're looking for. And so that clouds the issue because a lot of people they'll see, for example, somebody just went low carb, under 100 total grams of carbs a day, and reversed their obesity and their prediabetes and their mental health got better. And so they're like, okay, I can do that. And they do that. And it's like, well, maybe it's a little better, but not a lot. And so there's another very large percentage of people that needs to lower it down to somewhere between 20 and 50 total grams of carbs a day. And then they get the benefits. But then we're left with this subset over here of the 20%, and then even the 1% who, if they don't go completely carnivore, they are not going to get the benefits that their friend who just went low carb got. And so a lot of people see that as unfair. I always try to remind them that biology and physiology and indeed life is not fair. And it doesn't care if you think it's fair or not. If you want the health improvement, you've got to make the changes that your physiology is looking for in order for it to heal. And when it comes to anxiety, depression, OCD, schizophrenia, and all the other psychological conditions, for some people, they have to cut the carbs as close to zero as they possibly can. They have to cut the phytochemical intake as close to zero as they possibly can. And in many cases, they have to actually prioritize fat, add animal fat to their diet over and above what they would normally eat in order to get the full mental health benefit. And so if you're talking to a registered dietitian or you're talking to a mental health counselor, a social worker, a psychologist, if they don't understand the diet, what's going to wind up happening every time is you're going to wind up on somewhere between 2 and 5 psychiatric medications, and you're going to be numb and you're going to be, beat down and just kind of even keel, but you're not going to be enjoying the mental health that you deserve and that you're looking for.
As Dr. Berry mentions, insulin resistance is actually the hidden cause of most of your health problems today. Now, eating right is the biggest fix, but for many, it's not enough because everyday products like your body wash, your shampoo, and your toothpaste contain chemicals that can disrupt your hormones. Now, these are ingredients like parabens, phthalates, and even fluoride, and they have been shown to interfere with how your body uses insulin and can even lead to metabolic disease because these toxins soak through your skin or your gums, tricking your body and making it even harder to fix your metabolism. And that's why we created the Primal tallow balms, soaps, and now our new shampoo bars. Everything that we make is chemical free. It's made from 100% grass-fed tallow packed with vitamins A, D, E, and K2. Now, there is no preservatives. There is no fake fragrances. There is just stuff your body actually recognizes. And I've been using the unscented soap, shampoo, and the body wash, which is this one. And they gently cleanse without stripping anything. And if you're in the US, exciting news. Our new USA store is now open, which means faster shipping and cheaper prices. And for the next 14 days, get up to 30% off our new shampoo bars and body wash. Just head to theprimal.com/shampoo or use code shampoo at checkout. There's also a link in the description. I want to focus more on the insulin piece in terms of a lot of doctors, when they see their patients, they're just going to test their blood sugar or their A1C, but they can have insulin, elevated insulin in the background. How does that work?
So there are some people who, when they eat too many carbohydrates, they just get fat. And some people, if they eat too many carbohydrates, they're just going to get prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. Other people, their pancreas is really able to pump out the insulin, and they can keep the obesity in check. They might have a little belly fat, but they're not clinically obviously obese. Other people will never develop type 2 diabetes, even though they get literally 300, 400, 500 pounds. There's a subset of people that, unless you check the insulin level, you will never detect their metabolic disease. Now, so let's say that your doctor, you go to them and say, hey, check my insulin. They're like, no, I'm not checking that. I don't even know why you would want that. You take them your copy of Common Sense Labs and you say, this is why you want to check the insulin level. And they're like, okay, fine, we'll check it. If you look at the normal range for Quest or LabCorp, that's the two biggest lab corporations. If you have blood drawn and labs checked, more than likely, 99% of the time, your blood's going to be sent to Quest or LabCorp, in the United States at least. So their normal range, Rena, LabCorp says any insulin level under 24.9 is normal, is healthy, is fine, don't worry about it, right? So if that doctor has made that small step to just, okay, I'll start checking insulin, but then they don't know enough and they just go by what LabCorp says the normal range is, you're going to have a fasting insulin of 21, 22, 23, and your doctor is going to say, oh, yeah, see, it's normal. I told you, there's no reason to check that. So there has to be more education for doctors and dietitians to say, hey, fasting insulin of 24, that's hyperinsulinemia. That is not normal. Now, Quest does a little better job. They want you to get it down to maybe under 20, but still, that's far too high for many people who are suffering with obesity or fatty liver or any of the other metabolic syndromes or type 2 diabetes or prediabetes. They've got to cut the carbs even more than that. And so there's all these stumbling blocks along the way for people if they're trying to work with a registered dietitian or trying to work with just a traditionally trained doctor. And that's why I'm such a big fan of health coaches who are properly trained health coaches. They don't have to follow that 10% saturated fat cap. They can just say, look, eat from the top left of the pyramid, ignore everything else, and I promise your health is going to improve. And if people do that, their health will improve. But if it's a registered dietitian, if it's a licensed physician, they still have to at least voice the fact that they're following the guidelines, or they could get in trouble with their regulatory board.
Okay. So if somebody hasn't tested their fasting insulin yet, but they want to know, do I have hyperinsulinemia? What are some visual red flags on the body? I can look here, look here.
Yep.
What can I see?
Yep. There's a bunch of them. If you have lots of skin tags, you almost certainly have hyperinsulinemia. If you have acanthosis nigricans, which is dark patches of skin on your neck or under your arms or in your groin, you absolutely are hyperinsulinemic. If you have PCOS, if you have prediabetes, if you have metabolic syndrome, if you have a lot of belly fat, you almost certainly have hyperinsulinemia. And so I intimated earlier that even LabCorp and Quest will give you a false sense of assurance that you don't have that. Let me just talk blatantly about what should your fasting insulin be. Your fasting insulin should absolutely be under 10 10, and should be as low as you can get it, approaching 5 or 4. That's an optimal fasting insulin. And so when you get your insulin checked with LabCorp requests, they're not going to say, well, this is normal, but this is optimal. And we actually have those numbers in Common Sense Labs that this is considered normal, but this is optimal. And so everybody watching this, you want your fasting insulin to be under 10 at least, and as close to 5 as you can get it. That's how you know that you're approaching optimal metabolic health. When it comes to your joints, a lot of people don't make the connection that arthritis, that lots of chronic rheumatological and orthopedic diseases are directly linked to not only high insulin, high blood sugar, and high levels of intake of phytochemicals. They're just like, no, I've just got knee arthritis. That has nothing to do with my diet. Yes, it does. It absolutely does. When it comes to gut conditions, all the way from reflux GERD down to all of the small intestinal diseases and colon diseases, these are directly tied to your intake of carbohydrates and what that does to your glucose level, your insulin level, and how much total phytotoxin, phytochemical load you're ingesting on average each and every day. These things are all intimately tied to your food and thus reversible if you change the food you're eating. But that message is so often lost. The average doctor does not know that. The average dietitian does not know that. When it comes to type 2 diabetes, this is a completely reversible temporary condition. But yet the American Diabetes Association is still not saying that. They, on page 218 of their guidelines, they do say, well, you can try a low-carb diet if you want to, but they don't really give any guidance about how low in carbs it should be, how consistent you should be with that. And then, so if someone follows the ADA and they're like, oh, they've got a bunch of recipes on their website, and you start making all their recipes, falsely thinking they would not put a recipe up on their website if it had too many carbohydrates, right? That makes sense because they're literally a diabetes association. They would never put recipes on there that would actually cause harm for people with diabetes. You would be wrong. They have hundreds and hundreds of recipes listed on their website that will make your diabetes worse. And it's so egregious. And I still have a tiny bit of hope for the ADA, but not much. And that's in fact why me and Dr. Eric Westman and Professor Ben Bigman and Dr. Mariella Glant and Dr. Tony Hampton and registered dietitian Michelle Hearn, that's why we created the American Diabetes Society, the ADS, because we have recipes on our website that will make your blood sugar go down. They're delicious, but they will make your insulin level go down. They're tasty and easy to prepare, but they will make your A1C go down, not up. And that's the whole point of a diabetes society, right? Is to help you improve your overall health, to help you reverse prediabetes, to help you reverse type 2 diabetes. Isn't that the whole point of a diabetes society? It seems pretty common sense to me, but yet the Diabetes Association doesn't really seem to be interested in that. If they truly supported the new dietary guidelines and the new food pyramid, they would have already taken hundreds of recipes off their website. But they have not done that. And I predict they will not do that. But every single one of the recipes on the American Diabetes Society's website, it was already following this new food pyramid before it was even published. In fact, I would argue that our recipes and our guidance at the ADS kind of mentored and led the Dietary Guideline Committee to put out this new food pyramid, because our recipes at the ADS website, and I hope you'll put a link to that in the show notes, it actually follows the pyramid even before the pyramid was made public.
I do think that your work, Dr. Berry, including the ADS, Common Sense Labs, everything that you do, it just makes it really simple without the bullshit, as you like to say. So I will link everything in the show notes, because There is so much confusion about what is healthy, and this goes to my next question, the apple versus bacon debate. People think that apple or apples are healthier than bacon. Can you break down the insulin response briefly from eating an apple versus having bacon?
So many people think that the only sugar that occurs in an apple or grapes or banana is fructose. And if you don't have a degree in nutrition, I can't fault you for believing that. That's the message we've been taught, that fructose is fruit sugar, and that's all fruit has in it is fructose. And that, first of all, that's not true. Many fruits and also vegetables also contain glucose and also literally contain sucrose. I would remind everyone that sucrose, table sugar, which is one molecule of glucose and one molecule of fructose. I would just encourage you to try to think back, where does table sugar come from? It comes from sugar cane and sugar beets, both vegetables, both plants, but that's where table sugar comes from. So to pretend that a grape or a banana or a glass of fruit juice, that just contains fructose and nothing else, that's foolish on its face. Because we know that sucrose itself is processed from plants. That's where it comes from. And so all fruits, all plants have some degree of not only glucose, but sucrose as well. And so many people think, because we're also taught, at least if you're in any way paramedical or paranutrition, we're taught that fructose doesn't raise your blood sugar. And that's true. And so if an apple only contained fructose and no other sugar, you could eat an apple. You could eat 5 apples and it wouldn't raise your blood sugar at all. But there's several problems with that. First of all, apples do contain sucrose, which breaks down into fructose and glucose, and they also contain just free glucose. All fruits do. And so an apple is going to raise your blood sugar. Now, I want to circle back to the fructose load in an apple in a second, but let's just focus on that. So one of the beautiful things that wearing a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, has done for probably millions of people at this point is that it has shown them that these seemingly natural foods, these healthy foods, that their nutrition is saying, look, you get fruit is a free food. Beans are a free food. Grains are a free food. You don't have to worry about them. You can eat as much of those as you want. If you're wearing a CGM, a bowl of oatmeal, you can eat that every morning for breakfast. Put your CGM on and track your curve. Eat that bowl of oatmeal. Now, I'm not talking about the instant oatmeal with cinnamon and brown sugar. I mean the old-fashioned rolled oats that you have to cook for 3 days to make edible. Eat a bowl of that, steel-cut oats, and with some banana. And then honey is also, that's a free food, right? It's natural. Bees make it. Put a little honey on there. The average dietitian would tell you that is a perfect breakfast. But if you are wearing a CGM, my friend, you will quickly see your blood sugar do this, which is not good for you. That's not healthy. And that blood sugar typically stays elevated for an hour or 2 or 3, depending on how metabolically sick you are. Now, we've already talked about hyperinsulinemia. When your blood sugar does this because you ate a very healthy dietitian-approved breakfast, what happens to your insulin level? It goes right up along with it to try to pull it back down, because hyperglycemia, high blood sugar, is very dangerous. It's very bad for you. It glycates or gums up every cell and tissue in your body and makes your body run less efficiently, which is not good. It leads to chronic disease. But also that high insulin level, trying to get the glucose down, that's going to cause lots of chronic disease in and of itself. In fact, I think as more research continues to come out about this, I think we're going to find that your rate of cancer is significantly higher if you're running chronically high blood sugar levels and chronically high insulin levels as well, because insulin, among its many hundreds of jobs in your body, insulin is a growth hormone. Now, if your insulin level is normal between 4 and 10, you're getting an appropriate growth signal in your body. But if your insulin level is chronically above 10, it's 15, 20, 25, 30, depending on what you eat, your body and all of the potentially abnormal cells in your body, they're getting an abnormal growth signal, aren't they, Rena? And I guarantee you, when the research is done with fresh paradigms and looked at with fresh eyes, we're going to go, holy crap. Because we already know there's a strong association between being a type 2 diabetic and developing any cancer. Once we start to say, okay, anything above 10 for a fasting insulin, that's disease, that's abnormal, they're going to go, holy crap, this is intimately tied with your risk of breast cancer, uterine cancer, ovarian cancer, prostate cancer, testicular cancer, lung cancer, brain cancer. All these cancers are tied directly to your insulin being above 10. OMG. Yeah, I think that's exactly where we're headed with the research. And ultimately, 10 years looking back, every doctor is going to say, oh, yeah, you've got to have an insulin level that's under 10 or you're at increased risk for breast cancer or prostate cancer. Absolutely. But right now, the average doctor would look at you like you were from Mars. And I mean, Elon's getting really close to getting us to Mars. So maybe I need to start saying Saturn. They would look at you like you're from Saturn. If you said high insulin levels above 10 increase your risk of cancer, they're like, what? What are you talking about? But I promise you, the research already implies that currently, if you look at it with the right paradigm. But as more research continues to come out, that's going to become black and white, self-evident.
Now, if somebody has bacon, and I'll also put in their hot dogs, 'cause I know you like your hot dogs, what happens to the insulin?
So if you eat a pound of bacon, your insulin is going to increase a little bit because of the protein in the bacon. Yeah, bacon's a great source of protein. Has anybody ever told you that? Bacon is not a junk food. A lot of people have an emotional response. Literally, they get emotionally upset when I say something like bacon is a health food, or bologna is a health food, or hot dogs, that's a health food. That's it. They literally, their mind shuts down. The steel vault just closes. They're like, no, this guy's crazy. How could you even say something like that out loud? And my next question is, well, let's talk about bacon and bologna and hot dogs. Let's talk about that. They're super cheap. They're always in the picture. Same as hamburgers. They're always in the picture. When we picture junk food, it's always a hot dog with a bun and French fries and a Coke. Or it's a hamburger with French fries and a Coke. That's a picture in many people's mind of literal junk food, right? It's very difficult for them to say, okay, but if I take the hot dog out of that picture with the bun and the ketchup and the fries and the Coke, the hot dog's not junk food. But that's super hard for some people to grasp and understand. And I have to say, okay, well, let's talk about the ingredients of a hot dog or bologna or bacon. What's in it? So first of all, let's take bacon. Bacon is just sliced up meat with some salt and some spices. That's what it is. And so if you say bacon is not healthy, it's not good for you, you're saying sliced up meat is not healthy for humans to eat. Based on what? What are you talking about? Let's talk about bologna and hot dogs. What are the ingredients of bologna? Ground up meat, salt, and spices. Hot dogs, ground up meat, salt, spices. People used to, and some people still do, make bologna at home. You can make bologna on your kitchen stove. You can make hot dogs in your own kitchen right now today. You can make hot dogs. You can make bologna. You can make ground beef or minced beef. You can make bacon. You can order a side of pork, the pork belly, and take your own knife and slice it up and put it in a skillet and fry it. That's not junk food. There's no evidence that eating bacon or bologna or hot dogs increases your risk of cancer. There's zero evidence for that. There's zero evidence that eating bacon or bologna or hot dogs leads to heart disease. Zero evidence. But that's not what a lot of people have been taught. So if you eat a pound of bacon versus one apple, you're going to have a better insulin level, a better glucose level. You're going to have every single amino acid and fatty acid that your body needs. You're going to have more vitamins and minerals in the pound of bacon than you do have in just a single apple. Some people can eat that apple and it's totally fine, Rena. They're metabolically healthy enough that it doesn't really affect anything badly. I'm not anti-apple, but I am very pro-bacon and pro-bologna and pro-hot dog, especially for people who cannot afford $25 a pound grass-finished meat. So, because we all know that the economy is not in a good place, not just in the U.S., worldwide. Now, the stock market may be doing great, but the average person that's just trying to get by and get to the next paycheck, they are not doing great. And so if you tell that person, oh, you have to eat grass-finished beef, you cannot, that's it, you're basically telling that person they're screwed because they can't afford that. So what I'm saying to that person of limited means is, if you'll read the ingredient list on the hot dog or the bologna and get the one with the lowest amount of sugar and the lowest carbohydrate count and the fewest amount of chemicals, absolutely that bologna is a health food. Absolutely that hot dog is a health food. Absolutely bacon, which is not that cheap right now currently. Absolutely that cheap ground beef that you buy on sale, you buy a 10-pound pack, that's a health food. Eggs are a health food with the yolk only. Never eat an egg without the yolk. You can buy eggs, you can buy 3 dozen at a time at the supermarket, and each egg is about 7 cents or 10 cents. If you're of limited means, you could live on bologna, hot dogs, and eggs with some bacon thrown in there, and then cheap chicken livers. We can talk about that. Buy a pound of chicken liver. That's usually very inexpensive at the supermarket. And you ate nothing but bologna, hot dogs, chicken liver, bacon, and ground beef and eggs. You would completely reverse your type 2 diabetes. And when we look at the research, Rena, the number one risk factor for developing prediabetes and type 2 diabetes is not high LDL. It's not high ApoB. It's having either prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, being obese, having metabolic syndrome, having high blood pressure. All of those things drop and improve drastically on my poor boy diet of bologna, hot dogs, eggs, ground beef, and bacon, and chicken liver. All of those things go away. You reverse the biggest risk factors for heart attack and stroke by eating this poor white boy diet.
Exactly, poor white boy diet. But I think that is opening the door to millions of people to say, hey, this is not like a fancy diet.
Right.
I can eat hot dogs and reverse my disease and get off pills. You're making it very accessible and simple so that people can follow what they need to follow. And again, apples are not bad, but if you don't tolerate an apple, perhaps you need to lean on the bacon. As Dr. Berry mentions, insulin resistance is the root cause of every single disease. And if you have fatty liver disease, type 2 diabetes, or maybe you can't lose weight, you need more than this episode. You need connection. And that's why I'm incredibly excited to announce that the Primal has partnered with Meatstock so that you can meet over 52 of the world's top doctors and health experts, including Dr. Berry, Dr. Berg, and Dr. Chafee, and me, to join this conversation. Your health will not change by sitting on the sidelines around people that don't care about health, because you and I are about health, and this 3-day event is for you. Now, I've got a special offer only for my viewers. Get 25% off your ticket by just heading to this link, theprimal.com/2026. Now, spots are limited, but Dr. Berry, Dr. Berg, and myself look forward to saying hello to you at Meatstock in a few months. So I want to open up the conversation into the steps to reverse hyperinsulinemia. So you mentioned what to eat. So let's talk about the inverted food pyramid versus proper human diet, because you also advocate what to eat. Can you tell people exactly what to eat?
Yeah, the new inverted food pyramid is absolutely fits hand in glove with my proper human diet principles. Now, I've been talking with several people in the background who were working on this new food pyramid, but I had no direct input. I was not on the dietary committee. Okay. I had no direct input to anybody who made the final decision, but I think that they obviously were looking at other paradigms, one of which was the proper human diet principles. And so you can talk about what should I eat, either by talking about things that I should remove from my diet, or you can talk about it by saying, what should I add to my diet? And so, but I think that removing things from your diet that we've previously been trained or brainwashed to think we're super healthy for human beings to eat, I think that we have to combine that and do both to arrive at a proper human diet. So you need to remove all added sugar. That's step number one. And for most people, most of the naturally occurring sugar, you have to remove that from your diet before you're ever going to have your insulin come back down to a normal, healthy level. Because a lot of that sugar, and we didn't get around to the fructose in an apple, so I'll tie that in right here. If you're eating a bunch of apples a day or a bunch of grapes or a bunch of bananas, you're getting a very heavy fructose load. Now, that does not raise your blood sugar, but fructose is handled completely differently from glucose in your body. Your liver, when it gets a heavy fructose load from eating 5 apples a day, 5 bananas, a big bunch of seedless grapes, or even much worse, drinking a lot of fruit juice, even if you squeeze it yourself, it's going to have so much fructose in it that your body's going to have to store some of that fructose as fat in your liver and fat in your belly. The most unhealthy fat that your body can have in it is fat in your liver, fat in your pancreas, and fat inside of your belly called visceral fat. Not the fat that you can pinch, but the fat inside your belly. That heavy fructose load is going to make that fat worse and increase your risk of having a bad health outcome. So removing all the added sugar and most of the naturally occurring sugar for probably 50% of people, that will reverse their prediabetes completely. And it will lower their A1C significantly if they're type 2 diabetic. Step number 2 is to remove all grains and beans from your diet. And a lot of people are like, what are you talking about? Grains and beans? Yeah, the predominant thing you get from eating lots of grains, even whole grains, is starch. Starch breaks down into glucose starting in your mouth before you even swallow that bite of oats or wheat or rice or corn, right? And so you're going to spike your blood sugar with grains or beans. Now, beans do have some protein. It's an incomplete protein, but they also have lots of starch, which the typical registered dietitian doesn't talk about because they don't know about it. And so that starch in the grains and in the beans is going to keep your blood sugar spiked, which is going to keep your insulin level elevated. Step number 3 is to remove all of the vegetable seed oils. And there's 2 reasons for this. There's limited research that they lead to inappropriate inflammation. Remember, we were talking about that earlier. But also from the ancestral appropriateness of this. And many people out there who think that canola oil is healthy, they'll immediately say, oh, Dr. Berry, this is a logical fallacy. It's called the appeal to nature. He's saying only do natural things. No, I'm not saying that. Remember earlier I said that the dietary guidelines for cows could consist of one sentence: eat lots of grass. That same principle applies to every mammal on planet Earth. For lions and cougars, it would be eat lots of meat, the end, right? You can make a 1-sentence dietary guideline for human beings just like that. And it does not include eating anything that's only been discovered within the last 100 years, because we have not been able to evolve to not only adapt to that new substance in our diet, but to be able to actually utilize it beneficially. We can't do that in 100 years or 50 years. And that's indeed when all the vegetable seed oils before 1900, there was no such thing as vegetable seed oils in the human diet. And so you can't come at me and say, oh, that they're totally fine. No, you have not proven that. We have not evolved to eat that. You cannot come with that claim. You're the one who needs proof. that they're safe. Here's a 20-year-long study showing that they're safe. And so out of an abundance of caution, step 3 is remove all vegetable seed oils and eat the fats, cook with the fats that human beings have been eating for many, many thousands of years. And that's animal fats. And so that's step 1, remove all sugar. Step 2, remove all grains and beans. Step 3, remove vegetable seed oils. Now step 4 is an additive step. Cover at least half of your plate with meat, eggs, and fish. That is a proper human diet principle that I came up with years ago, but the new food guideline, the food pyramid, makes it obvious that that's what you should do. At least half of your plate should be covered with red meat, with some kind of meat, with eggs, always with the yolk, and with animal fats. There you go. And so then if you are young and metabolically healthy, the other half of your plate can be low carb fruit, vegetables and maybe some fruits. Please consider cooking them to lower the phytochemical content. Maybe some berries, maybe some low carb nuts. Consider roasting the nuts and maybe even sprouting the nuts before you eat them to lower the phytochemical content, right? And so, and for literally half the population, under 100 total grams of carbs a day is going to fix every metabolic problem they have. Some people, because of that normal distribution curve we talked about, they have to cut the carbs and the phytochemicals even lower. Some people have to just live in the top left-hand part of the new food pyramid. They have to just eat meat and eggs. And that's the diet that's going to give them optimal health. So you see how all of this ties together. The more carbohydrates you eat, the more phytochemicals you're going to be getting. By definition, every grain has something just like gluten and gliadin in it. Every bean has something just like gluten and gliadin in it. They have different names, and most dietitians don't know the names. Right? And so they have no idea why, even though you're eating this beautifully healthy diet full of fruits and vegetables and lots of whole grains, they have no idea why your ulcerative colitis or your Crohn's or your IBS is still out of control. It's because you're eating too many phytochemicals, right? They have no idea why you're eating lots of whole grains and fruits and vegetables, but you're still type 2 diabetic. You're eating way too many carbohydrates. And so if Donald Trump just literally became what many people fear he wants to become, a dictator, and he said the only thing an American can eat is meat, eggs, fish, and the only fats you can cook with is butter, beef tallow, and bacon grease. And if I catch you using anything else or eating anything else, I'll put you in prison or I'll chop your head off. You understand that type 2 diabetes would disappear in America. Now, he's a benevolent dictator, so he would say you can eat as much meat and eggs as you want. You can eat as many times a day as you want. But if I catch you eating any kind of grains or beans or fruits or vegetables, you go to prison. There would be no such thing as type 2 diabetes in America. It would go completely away within 12 months. Now, I am about as libertarian as you can get. So I do not want there to be any federal regulation ever telling people what to eat, forcing people what to eat. That is the exact opposite of my very nature. But I do want people to be informed and educated. And this food pyramid goes a long way towards doing that. And so in that respect, I'm 100% for this food pyramid and sticking to the top left corner. But I am not for any regulations or mandates that you shall or you must. That's antithetical to my very nature. And I would oppose any kind of thou shalt not or thou wilt not. I would oppose that, and actually I would pledge my life to fight against such things. But when it comes to educating people and teaching you the truth about it, I would also give my life for that as well. Because if you stick to the top left of the new food pyramid, all of your chronic metabolic conditions are going to either improve drastically or go completely away.
Absolutely. Choice is always the better option than dictatorship, because one, you understand, one, you're making the decision, one, you're being told what to do. We're not children. We're adults. We know what to do. we have to be educated. That's what you're doing. What do you think are the worst foods? If somebody follows what you're just saying, let's just say keto, carnivore, low carb, you probably see this. They probably eat some foods that you're like, why are you eating those foods? You should not be eating those foods. That's still making you fat. It's not getting your insulin down. What are those worst foods that they still have that they should toss in the bin?
Fruit juices and vegetable juices are junk food. They're not health foods. Okay. When you take fruit and distill it down into the fruit juice, that's pure sugar. It's pure sugar. And that is never a healthy option, ever. But there are many people on an animal-based diet that are like, no, I heard that fruit's actually good. Plants want me to eat the fruit, which is technically true. But for people who fatten easily or develop prediabetes or metabolic syndrome easily, fruit is junk. Fruit juice is junk food. Okay, it is dangerous for you if you fatten easily or you develop metabolic disease, prediabetes, your A1C goes up, your fasting insulin's above 10. Fruit juice is dangerous. Okay? Honey, agave nectar, all these sweeteners, they're like, oh, this is natural. If you're 20 years old and you work out 8 hours a day and you've got great genetics, maybe honey's fine for you. But if you're like most of us who fatten easily, develop prediabetes easily, or your insulin easily spikes above 10 if you eat away from carnivore at all, honey is dangerous. Honey is junk food. Okay? So the worst possible meal that you could eat is a meal that blends added sugar or too much naturally occurring sugar, grains, and vegetable seed oils. So that would be the typical ultra-processed breakfast. And then a glass of fruit juice to go along with that. Like that is a literal long-term slow poison death sentence to eat that kind of food. Yet that's touted by many registered dietitians as the healthiest diet you could eat. So that would be a bowl of oatmeal with some margarine. Margarine is made from vegetable seed oils, or even worse, plant butter. Like that term should be illegal because that's very misleading. Plant butter is made of vegetable seed oils, and then you're gonna sprinkle some sugar on that, and then you're gonna have a glass of fresh squeezed non-GMO organic orange juice. That is, if I wanted to make somebody a type 2 diabetic, that is the breakfast I would feed them every day. That is literally a diabetes-causing diet. But yet many people have been taught by a registered dietitian that they trust that that's the diet you should eat. That's the breakfast you should eat. Many people have been taught by their doctor, who they love and trust and hold in an almost demigod status. Like this guy, he's at least an apostle, if not a prophet. No, that's causing your diabetes. That's not improving your diabetes. And so at the very bottom of the new food pyramid is whole grains. And so the whole grains are now occupying the position that they should hold in a food pyramid, which is the lowest and smallest. That's a great improvement because remember, it used to take up the entire base of the pyramid. That was considered the foundation of what your diet should be. But there are many of us who any whole grain, any grains whatsoever, any bread whatsoever, any tortillas, any flatbread, any kind of bread, even sourdough bread that you made at home while you were barefoot in your own kitchen and used the mother to make it with, that's going to make your blood sugar and your insulin level worse. I'm sorry. It seems very natural. It seems very ancient. But if you actually go back and study the history and the anthropology, before 10,000 years ago, nobody was eating sourdough bread. Nobody was eating grains in any meaningful quantity. No, there was no such thing as added sugar, and there was very little naturally occurring sugar in the optimal human diet more than 10,000 years ago. It just didn't exist. And then vegetable seed oils, they've only been around for 1 century. And we're talking about, we know what humans ate for thousands of years in the past. So it becomes, when you really understand the big picture, it becomes foolish and almost looks devious when somebody's telling you to eat lots of grains and lots of beans, and added sugar's fine, don't worry about it if it's a natural sugar. Keep in mind, table sugar comes from sugar beets and sugar cane, which is as natural as you can get. And then use margarine because butter's bad. And then have a glass of fresh squeezed fruit juice. That's almost devious at this point. That's almost evil to recommend that diet for somebody who develops prediabetes or type 2 diabetes very easily. For a child who has type 1 diabetes, you're doing active harm to that child when you recommend that breakfast for them. Active harm. You are actively harming their body and shortening their life. So I would encourage every registered dietitian and doctor, please reassess. Please, if you're currently recommending a plant-based diet or a vegan diet or a vegetarian diet, please go back and look at all this with fresh eyes. I know you mean well. I know you want the best for your patients and the best for your clients, but you're actively harming your patients and your clients by recommending a diet, a breakfast like oatmeal with honey, with sliced up banana, and a glass, if you use margarine and a glass of fruit juice, you're harming your patient. You're harming your client. Please reconsider that recommendation.
Let's move on to optional step number 5 to kind of fix insulin, but fix people's health. Your thoughts about iodine. Do you think everyone needs iodine?
Virtually everyone in modern society needs either to eat iodine-rich foods, and I have a YouTube video about the 7 iodine-rich foods, and a hint, they're all from the ocean, okay? Because that's where you get most of the iodine. Here's the problem. Most people don't live near the ocean, right? And most people don't eat food that's grown locally. And so they're eating ultra-processed food that was shipped over on a container ship that was grown in the middle of a continent, which by definition is low in iodine. And so the U.S. government right now recommends that you get at least 150 micrograms of iodine a day. All that amount of iodine is going to keep you from developing is a goiter, which is a big, fat, inflamed thyroid gland, okay? That's all 150 micrograms is going to do for you. Your body needs much more iodine than that, okay? Every single human cell that's ever been studied has something called a sodium iodide symporter on the cell membrane. This little machine actually does work by grabbing iodine outside of the cell and pulling it inside the cell. This is not just your thyroid cells I'm talking about. This is not just your mammary gland tissue, which also concentrates iodine. This is not just your salivary glands, which also concentrate iodine. Every cell in your body, from your skin cells to your gastrointestinal cells to your muscle cells to your bone cells, they all pull the iodine inside the cell. That means they need it. They wouldn't do that work if they didn't need the iodine. And so, in my opinion, the average person needs at least 600 micrograms a day of iodine. Now, many people are worried about getting too much iodine. Now, that's theoretically possible, but unless you're just taking an egregious amount of an iodine supplement, guess what the human kidney does if you take in a little bit too much iodine, Rena?
Filters it out?
You just urinate it out. Your body's like, oh, we got a little too much. Okay, grab that, pee it out. Boom, it's gone. Your body doesn't store it. You don't store iodine at all. You use it actively daily. Every cell uses it. And so if you don't have a daily supply of iodine coming in, you're at much higher risk of all the metabolic conditions, because this is indeed the master gland, is it not? It's in charge of every single step of your metabolism, of your metabolic rate, of how fast you burn fat. And so if you get your iodine level down to 10 or lower, but you're deficient in iodine, you will lose a little weight, but it will not be the amount of weight that you need to lose, and definitely not the amount that you want to lose, right? So this is a multifactorial, very complex system, and you should be able to trust your doctor and trust your dietitian to give you all this advice. But currently, you cannot blindly trust your doctor or your dietitian, or they are liable to tell you that bowl of oatmeal, which has it has more glyphosate in it than it has iodine. Okay? So either they've bought into the false fact that you need lots of vitamin G every day, which is glyphosate, which I would say, yeah, let's try to avoid vitamin G. I don't think you need any of that. But what you do need is lots of fat, lots of animal protein, and you need a good source of iodine in your diet. And if you live in the middle of a large continent, that can be Australia, that can be North America, South America, Asia, or Europe. If you live in the middle of a continent, not near the ocean, then foods grown in the soil there, they're going to be, by definition, not enough iodine in that food. Not only is it not going to be enough in the vegetables, the plants, but the cows that grazed in the middle of that continent, they ate the grass and they ate the plants that grew there. The beef's not going to have enough iodine either, okay? Because the cow's going to concentrate that iodine that they get into their thyroid, but there's not going to be enough in the muscle tissue, which is what we predominantly eat from the cow, right? So you're not going to be getting enough iodine, and that's why currently I think that everybody in modern society probably needs to prioritize either eating iodine-rich foods that I talk about in my YouTube video, or taking some kind of supplement that gives you a daily source of iodine. And so Salty Minerals that I helped design has 600 micrograms of iodine in it. And so you're going to be getting that much, plus however much is in your diet. That's not going to be too much iodine. A lot of people supplement with Lugol's, 2% or 5% iodine. I'm a huge fan of that. I don't own a penny of stock in the whatever company makes Lugol's. I don't have an affiliate deal with them. I just know that if you don't get enough iodine in your diet, you're never going to reach what you would consider optimal health. Man, I feel amazing. You're never going to have that level of health if you're not getting enough animal fat, animal protein, and iodine, along with all the other minerals that the human body needs.
If somebody was to employ these 5 steps, how quickly can they fix their health and reverse their elevated insulin?
So some things are going to improve within weeks, Rena. Some things will be drastically better in just a week or two. Other things take much longer to get better. Some things will take months. And so let's just take a chronically inflamed, obese, type 2 diabetic with high blood pressure and metabolic syndrome and fatty liver. Let's just take that as just the person. And we put them and say, okay, here's the new food pyramid. And you take a red Sharpie and you circle the top left corner. I want you to eat only the foods in the top left corner. That would be a carnivore diet or a ketovore diet, right? You can eat as much as you want. You can eat it 3 times a day, 4 times a day, 5 times a day. I care not. I'm not going to tell you how much or how often to eat. You decide that. Eat when you're hungry, eat till you're full. That's literally it. You could put that in one sentence, couldn't you, Rena? In a dietary guideline. Okay. And they're like, okay, I'll do that. So within 2 weeks, their blood sugar and their blood insulin level are going to be significantly lower than they were before. Already, if you scan their liver, in 2 weeks' time, you're going to notice that the amount of fatty liver is lower. Their fatty pancreas, there's an epidemic of fatty pancreas, but no doctor ever talks about it. It's a big, big problem. Fatty pancreas is going to be gone in 2 or 3 weeks. It'll literally reverse in 2 or 3 weeks. Fatty liver is going to be improved. Their blood sugar is going to be better. Their serum insulin is going to be better. And because of the fluid shift caused by the lowering insulin, their weight, they're going to drop anywhere from 5 to 10 pounds in 2 weeks. Now, most of that's water weight. And a lot of people say, well, that's not fat loss, so that doesn't improve your health. Contraire. You're holding 5 to 20 pounds of unneeded, unnecessary, unhealthy water on your body, in your body. Your heart's having to pump that fluid that you don't even need. That's a stress on your heart. That's a strain on your heart. All of your organs are having to deal with this extra 5 to 20 pounds of unhealthy water that you're carrying around. All your joints are having to carry this extra weight. All of your muscles are having to carry this extra weight. That's absolutely a health improvement if you lose 5 to 20 pounds of water in the first week or two. That's a great improvement in your health. Your heart thanks you for that. Your kidneys thank you for getting rid of that unneeded, unhealthy water. Now let's take that person out to 1 month. We could recheck their A1C. Let's say it was 12 before. Their A1C in 1 month is going to be down 1 or 2 points. Okay, now let's extend it out to 3 months. Their fatty liver is going to be either gone or almost completely gone. Fatty pancreas is a distant memory at 3 months. Okay, their A1C is, if it was started at 12, it's going to be down to 8 in 3 months on a carnivore diet. Okay, their blood sugars are going to be much better. Their fasting insulin is going to be much better. Their A1C, which maybe was 6 before, their HSCRP, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Their CRP, which was maybe 6 before, is now going to be down to 3. Their inflammation is better because when you cut the carbs, you also cut the phytochemical load, didn't you? Drastically. And so if the phytochemicals were causing any degree of inflammation, that inflammation is going to be improved. You completely eliminated vegetable seed oils because they're now cooking with bacon grease, beef tallow, and butter. So that's why their HSCRP improves so much in just 3 months. It may not be back to normal. Their A1C may not be back to normal. Their blood pressure is going to be significantly lower. Maybe not back to normal in 3 months, but it's going to be much improved in 3 months. Now we take that person out to a year, 12 months. Their type 2 diabetes is completely gone. Their fatty liver is completely gone. Their blood pressure has either returned to normal or near normal. Their A1C is back down to, at max, 6.0, if not lower than that. Their blood sugar's normal. Their fasting insulin's now back to close to 10, if not 10. Their HSCRP is down closer to 1.0 now. They feel better. One thing they're going to notice that's really not currently measurable is that their mental health, their mood, their stamina, their get up and go, their productivity, their motivation, all that's going to be significantly better. Their joint stiffness is going to be better. Their gut health is going to be better. They're going to be sleeping better. Every single metric that we can measure, either objectively or subjectively, is going to be better in this hypothetical person who started out being an obese type 2 diabetic with high blood pressure and fatty liver. They're going to essentially be a new and improved human in 12 months.
If somebody says, wow, I want that, but they're on the fence. They're not taking the action. What is your words of wisdom to push them, get them there, Dr. Berry? Say something.
So most people they're selfish enough to be able to do what's best for them. Financially, nutritionally, they can, this is going to improve my position, my joy in life. Okay, I'll do that. Most people, that's all the motivation they need. Some people are not me-centered. Some people are other-centered, right? All they care about is their family and their friends and their community and whatever organizations that they believe in and belong to. So when you say, hey, you can be healthier, if that doesn't really hit with them, they're like, yeah, I don't really care about me. And maybe secretly I hate me. I don't really like me. Okay, so then I turn it to, let's talk about the love of your life, whether that's your spouse or your partner or whatever. If you continue to get metabolically sicker, guess who has to take care of you when you have a heart attack or a stroke? Or you have to have a foot amputated, or now you're blind in one eye because of your diabetes, or now you're on dialysis because of your diabetes and blood pressure. Who do you think that's going to affect directly and the most? The person who loves you most in the world. That's going to change their life permanently and not in a good way. Okay? A lot of people are focused exclusively on their children or their grandchildren. I don't give a damn about me. I just want the best for my children. Okay. Well, guess who has to cry at your funeral that came 20 years too soon? Your children. They're the ones who get to grieve and mourn and cry. And so in many cases, your death is the least bad thing that can happen. Guess who has to come visit you in the nursing home after you've had some catastrophic event that didn't kill you, but it disabled you. It crippled you for the rest of your life, however long that might be. Guess who now has to come to the nursing home and visit you? Nursing homes don't smell good. They're not pleasant. Nobody likes nursing homes. Your children that's going to be a burden on them to have to come see you. Now, at least your adult children can suck it up and do it. But what about your grandchildren? Grandchildren don't understand why they walk into a facility that stinks and there's lots of weird people around to go visit grandma or grandpa. They don't understand that. All they know is, I hate this place. I hate this. I don't want to be here. I don't want to have to sit here in this little stinky room and visit with this person I don't really know. No grandchild wants that. No child wants that. And so even if you're not me-centered, focus on the person you love most in the world. Do it for them. Focus on your children or your grandchildren. Do it for them. If you're completely committed to a cause or an organization, you're like, I don't care about me. I don't really care about my posterity. I just care about this movement. Okay, how effective are you going to be at helping that movement with whatever that movement is or that organization? If you're at home because you feel like shit every day, your blood sugar's high, you're going blind, you've got neuropathy, you can't walk, you're not any kind of benefit to that movement. You're not helping anything. You're a net liability. After you've had that first heart attack or that first stroke or that amputation or dialysis, you're in the nursing home now. You can't help that movement. Even if you can't help that religious movement or that community movement, you're done. You're a net zero. Nobody cares your opinion. You can't move the needle at all. You've basically been put on the bench. You're taken out of the game. So whether your primary motivation is improving your health or improving your loved one's life or your children's life or your grandchildren's life or the movement you believe in's life, regardless of what your motivation is, you're going to move the needle more if you're healthy, mentally healthy and physically healthy. You can actually do things to make the world a better place, either for you, your children, your grandchildren, your spouse, your partner, your wife or husband. You can actually make their life better actively. But if you've been taken out of the game and put on the bench because you're metabolically ill, I'm sorry, all you're going to do is make everybody's life worse. It's unintentional. You don't mean for that to happen, but that's the net outcome of you not being metabolically healthy. And I'm sorry, this sounds pretty harsh. I get that. I'm well aware. But maybe you need harsh. Maybe you need that to go, oh crap, this is not just about me. This is about my wife or husband and my kids and my grandkids and my neighbors and the friends that I love. I'm actually a burden on them if I'm not becoming healthier physically and mentally. Yep, that's exactly right. And I'm sorry to be harsh, but if you need harsh, you're welcome.
It's time for a change. I think that your words, you say it's harsh, but people need that. They don't need an inflated information or an inverted food pyramid. They need the real truth. All your links will be in the show notes. Dr. Berry, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Check out this episode with Dr. Eric Berg. It is everything about how to lose your visceral fat, why insulin matters, and exactly what you need to eat. I'll see you next week.